All right, now we're getting on to the exciting stuff. I mean, we're only going to do a few videos about this, but we're talking about submissions now. And so for us, we wanted to talk about our approach and mindset of teaching beginners, because nothing drives us nuts more than watching an armbar being taught from guard.
First class, yeah.
Classes. We had talked about with alignment, you got to learn how to control your body and then learn how to control your opponent's body. And then once you can do that, now we can trust you to safely submit somebody, looking out for your partner's safety, as well as making sure that you're not going to make catastrophic errors that then just ends up losing you positions. And so you should be working through this instructional and feeling very confident in all these different spots, so that then when you start moving into the submissions, everything's safer.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about safety, because it's not just about safety in the sense of until you're able to control your body, you're not able to apply submissions with control. So we're talking about safety when it comes to preventing injury, but we're also talking about safety when it comes to your own like positional security. If you go for a submission and you lose the position, you get put in in a bad position in training, it's not a big deal. If you were ever to do it, hopefully not in a street fight, but that would be catastrophic. But if you're training for competition, particularly if you're training for MMA, and you throw up bad submission attempts and you end up in a bad position, you get punched in the face a bunch, that's your safety that you're compromising. So just having the overall approach that submissions should not be something that you throw out and hope that they work. Submissions should be a consequence of a sequence of control that escalates from some to more to most to overwhelming control before you achieve a submission, which is why in our program, the first submission you learn is the rear naked choke, and it's basically the only submission that we teach in our 101 program. So we will have a dedicated video on the rear naked choke, how to apply the choke mechanics and how to do some hand fighting to get to it. That's what we'll start you off with. And just overall, it's really important to make the distinction between chokes and joint locks. As far as, and I believe Ryan Hall said this once, where chokes are the only true submissions. In that there is no choice in the matter. If I put Rory in a rear naked choke and he passes out, it doesn't matter whether he wants to pass out or not, he's going to pass out. If I put Rory in an armbar, he has a choice whether or not to tap. Rory's going to choose to tap because he's not an idiot, but he's also not fighting for, tons of money.
Yeah.
And if either of us were fighting for tons of money, we might make the choice to let you break our arms so we can continue fighting. And so in that sense, an armbar isn't really a submission so much as it's a question. Do you want your arm broken or not? And that question can be answered, in a couple of ways.
Yeah, and rarely at the highest level do we, we'll see it with inside heel hooks and outside heel hooks, but we rarely see a joint lock go to the point where we cause catastrophic damage where that person can't continue, because as we talked about with the chokes, if someone's unconscious, it's over. Now, if you break somebody's limb in one of the places, that would be one less limb for them to fight with. It should be pretty easy to keep taking them out from there, but it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
You don't usually just take a limb out and it's gone.
Yeah.
You see, you're getting injured to very different degrees, and the person can keep fighting through it.
Yeah, if you're quite new to jiu-jitsu, which if you're watching this, you probably are. There's a very famous instance between Roger Gracie and Jacare at the World Championships, where Roger Gracie, very famous for fundamentals, armbar from the guard, and breaks Jacare's arm, but Jacare is up on points. And it's the finals of the World Championships, so he just tucks his arm into his body and runs around circles for a minute or two, and he survives and he wins the World Championships that way. So that mentality that some people under some circumstances will bring to the table will ensure that a joint lock, no matter how devastating, is not instant victory. And so we have to distinguish, particularly for those of you who are interested in training for very high stakes. Again, whether it's self-defense or maybe it's law enforcement, maybe it's MMA, maybe it's Jiu-Jitsu World Championships, whatever the high stakes are, some people will not tap unless you can really catastrophically break their limb. And it's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about. We're certainly not going to talk about that sort of breaking mechanics, but we should mention this. We have a visiting student program at our academy. I don't know if we've talked about it before in this program. If you were ever interested in coming and training with us, we offer this program to anybody from any academy on the planet. You can come here, stay for free for a week, and train for free for a week. Make sure you contact us before you show up. Don't just knock on our door, but it's available. So we've had literally hundreds of students all over the world come and train with us. I would say the majority of them, if not all, have had braking mechanics, because what I'll do is I'll let, just an armbar, I will let them put me in an armbar fully extended like this and have them try to make me tap. And I've yet to have to do it with any visitor that I've gone through this with. I'm not going to do it with Rory because he can definitely make me tap. But the idea is that with a couple of adjustments to body position and good understanding, you can absorb a lot of force in a joint lock. And the vast majority of people who are doing jiu-jitsu around the world who are not professional competitors do not have the ability, and I mean blue belts, purple belts, brown belts, do not have the ability to catastrophically break someone's arm. It's something that people really sort of misunderstand. What they do have the ability to do is slightly injure somebody in training. Yeah. And so that's what we're trying to do. So it's something to realize, depending on where you're training and depending how long you train, you may be in a position where you think that you can break someone's arm, but because your braking mechanics are not on point, you are forced to do big, jarring, wrenching movements.
More dangerous.
Which are far more dangerous. And so this is a roundabout way of getting to the point where when you do learn how to actually break a joint, make sure that however you learn it, whether you learn it from us, we've got some good resources, bjjconcepts.net, other stuff that I've done with Stefan Kesting on Grapple Arts, where we talk about the very fine details of submissions, or whether you get it from somewhere else. Understand that when you learn joint locks, if you cannot elicit a tap within the first, let's say, 10 or 20% of a movement, you don't have good braking mechanics, which means you will be unsafe. If you are trying to apply a submission rapidly, whether it's in training or in competition, you are more of a danger to others. So, again, not the scope of what we're talking about today, but somewhere out there, find ways of getting your joint locks to the point where you can, again, elicit a tap with a very minimal amount of movement. And the remaining, so the tap should come when somebody fears for injury. You should have 70, 80, even 90% of your range of motion remaining to cause the injury.
Especially at the gym with like just the lower level of intensity, and I mean, yeah, like you're saying, like got all these hobbies. It drives me nuts when I see a Reddit post where it's like, I was trying to apply this arm bar and then he wasn't tapping, so then I started to violently bridge into it. And it's like, who gives a shit? This is just rolling on a Friday night at the gym. Like, I get it if you're in a competition, you're going to be trying to put that person away, but it's like, you guys need your training partners. You can't go breaking your toys, otherwise you're not going to have anybody to play with and get better at jiu-jitsu with. So there should never be a point where you're like, am I going to risk my partner's safety here to try and get that tap and like actually try and hurt them? It's like, it should be a much more slower and controlled movement. So in these for the rest of this instruction, what we're going to talk about next is the rear naked choke. Show you guys some solid ways of being able to get that. And then we're going to talk about the ankle lock, just so that you have an understanding of how to defend, have an understanding of how the ankle lock works and how to defend it, because that is a submission that is legal at the white belt level if you're looking to compete. And then we're going to talk about some submissions like arm bar, triangle, and stuff, especially from the bottom, because this is one that we see students go for and then end up getting their guards pass, end up in horrible positions going for a submission. So we're not going to be covering everything.
Certainly not,
We're not going to be going into crazy detail on everything. There's going to be, once again, an overview like we've done with the positions. And then if you wanted to go into like a 60 video module on the triangle choke, we have that on bjjconcepts.net, the same like the arm bar and stuff, where we get into ridiculous detail. But this is just going to be something to help give you some better ideas and understanding of how these submissions work and how you guys can keep yourselves and your training partners safe.
And just a final thought. So we talked about chokes and joint locks. Whether it's you choose to pursue, you'll favor one or the other, generally speaking. We overwhelmingly recommend as a beginner, and even frankly as an expert, that you favor chokes, because it's the only real submission. But whether you favor chokes or joint locks, do try to understand this. Every submission is actually a position unto itself. The same way we talked in our videos about, this is how you control the mount, this is how you control the back, etc., etc. Every submission should be a positional system where you can enter it and leave it. And if you don't learn it that way, that's a hard switch to make down the road. If you've been training for 5 years and just been throwing submissions out at people and just trying to catch them with just that submission, you're going to have a harder time making that adjustment. Everyone that's really good at this stuff views it as, I get here and I can move in and out of it at a time and place of my choosing. I can return to different positions. I can alternate between different submission positions, and positional positions. So we encourage you when you're learning submissions not to think of it as I get to the mount and then I do an arm bar. It's I go from controlling the mount to arm bar control, and if I'm losing my arm bar control, maybe I transition to the back. We might touch on that a little bit in the videos, but just keep that in mind. Every submission is actually a position. Learn to control it first, and then learn to incrementally apply pressure with it, and you will be able to get the submission much more reliably than if you just shoot the submission at someone and it either succeeds or fails. So just keep that in mind.